a real pleasure and in fact a singular honor for us to welcome Mr. Arun Sarin. So we will of course engage in a fairly free-flowing conversation with Mr. Sarin, and time permitting we'd also like to get you engaged, and so do think of your questions as the conversation evolves. Arun, a very warm welcome to Shiv Nadar University, and especially this session, which is earmarked for the School of Management and Entrepreneurship, and it is a big moment for us to welcome you. For me, it's a personal pleasure. We share an alma mater, we share some other common interests, so it's an added honor to have Arun here. I thought that we'd begin in a perhaps traditional way. One of the things that I learned over my long journey was that really learning the biography, learning the journey of exemplary leaders is an incredible learning experience. There's a lot that we can pick up from the snippets that they do share along the way. So Arun, if you're okay with that, if you wouldn't mind tracing for us your journey from being, as it were, an army brat in India to Kharagpur, to Cal Berkeley, to all the amazing companies that you were involved with, and the one now you sit on your board. What stands out, let's say the top 3 or 5 things as you first detail your journey, and then perhaps you can share some.
Shubhro, first of all, thank you very much for a kind introduction. Delighted to be here. As you were asking your question, I was saying, how much time does he have? So if you want me to go back to my Army brat days and then IIT and on to the United States and on from there, I'd say there are a few things that stand out for me. Let me try and pick 3. So the first one I'd say is my IIT days. I went to IIT Kharagpur. I was there between 1970 and 1975. And I have to tell you, I got into an IIT not because I wanted to be some great engineer or anything. My father was in the army. I stood for the NDA exam. I came in 7th in the country. I wanted to go to NDA. My brother was a little older. My mother said, no, I only have 2 sons. Both of them can't go to the army. So you do something else. And somebody had an extra IIT form. I filled out the IIT form, took the exam, and I got into IIT Kharagpur. So here I am. I did well. I was good academically. I was good athletically. I was involved in a lot of things. And I think the singular thing that happened to me at IIT is this combination of intellectual prowess together with enough extracurricular activities and sporty things that sort of made me what I felt was a more complete person. And as luck would have it, I then went on to the United States, and Mrs. Indira Gandhi was our convocation speaker, and I was being awarded the B.C. Roy Gold Medal at IIT Kharagpur, which is not for the smartest kid. The smartest kid gets the President's Gold Medal, but for the best all-around graduating student, I was being given the B.C. Roy Gold Medal. And I couldn't go back because there were visa issues, and there were money issues, and there were school issues and all that, but I missed the opportunity of meeting Mrs. Gandhi at that time. That's one very sort of formative time of my life. I'd say the second important thing would be at university, at Berkeley. I was in the engineering school in the PhD program, and I had a friend, and he said to me, you just don't look like a PhD sort of professor type of guy. I can't see you. And back in the day, you got to remember, this is 1975, 76. If you got a PhD in engineering, you taught at a university, Berkeley or Stanford or someplace like that. You wore a tweed coat with little, kind of elbow patches and all that. You would know that well.
Yeah.
And so she said, you just don't strike me to be that kind of person. And I said, really? So I think I could be that person. She said, no, I don't think so. She was in the business school. I took a couple of classes in business school. I did well. I got a scholarship to move to the business school. That person's name is Rami, and she was my girlfriend then, and she's now my wife and my life partner for the last 40 years. So, meeting somebody who can sort of give you gyan, as it were, being married to the right person who shares common aspirations and goals ends up being a hugely important thing. I'm looking around the room, I'm not sure how many of you are married or unmarried, but finding a life partner, I think, is one of the best and sometimes tricky part of life. But so that would be the second thing I'd say.
Very blessed, yes.
The third I would say is, so I ran Vodafone, and we had moved from California. My daughter was at school at Stanford, so there was a little bit of, one kid here, another kid there, going to London, coming back. So when I came back, we came back to the same community that we lived in, and one morning I get a call, and it says, well, they're calling me from Buckingham Palace in a very English accent. So I thought, this is one of my friends pulling my leg, saying that it's a call from Buckingham Palace. The Queen wants to know if she would like to give you an honor. And I said, so, sorry, what do you mean? What kind of an honor? She said, it would be a knighthood. Would you accept a knighthood from the Queen? And at this stage, I'm completely sure that this is fake news. Somebody is pulling my leg. But sure enough, it was real. And I had spent a lot of time with the Queen, partially because I ran the biggest global company in the UK. And she was always fascinated by the fact that I would be in Japan one day, South Africa the next day, India the next day, China the next week, the United States. I was all over the world. And she was curious about how these countries work, what their politics were, what their social norms were, what their economic situation was. This is not to say she gets a weekly briefing from her prime minister and everybody else, but she doesn't get what I would call just the normal human thing. So she was always very curious to hear from me what I did when I was in South Africa or Japan or whatever. So those were wonderful, wonderful conversations. And I have to say that being knighted by the Queen was quite special.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And firstly, I really must apologize for our departure from protocols, Sir Arun. We should have been addressing you that way. We should have been genuflecting all the way. We had Sir Tim last year. We didn't forget. So sorry about that, Sir Arun. So thanks really for sharing that. But specifically, I know you had, as part of your ascension to the top spot at Vodafone, you were very involved in strategy and in mergers and acquisitions. Now I have a slight vested interest because I do my work in that area, but I do consider mergers and acquisitions in some way the pinnacle of corporate strategy. And then really the encapsulation of every aspect of the business, because you have to assess not only that, the market, the conditions, the competitors. So what was your stance as you got involved in all these M&A transactions, and how did that contribute to your ascension?
Yeah. So I was lucky in that right after business school I went to work for a management consulting company. And then I went into industry. And when you go into industry, you could be in technology or sales or marketing or finance or operations or any number of things. But because I came from a management consulting background, I ended up in the strategy and corporate development group of a couple of companies that ended up being AirTouch and Vodafone and all of that. But much of my career was actually in strategy and M&A. By the way, back then, you're a distinguished professor, you're teaching your students here to think strategically and think, kind of from an economic finance perspective on mergers and acquisitions and all that. It was a far less well-developed idea at that stage. But it always fascinated me to kind of think about a company and think about the future as to how technology or customers were going to change and how regulation might change, how competition might change. I was always fascinated with that part of strategy. And then as you say, to make things happen, then you either grow organically or you go buy companies. So I've done a lot of strategy and a lot of M&A in my lifetime. And if you want a number, I've done close to $300 billion worth of M&A. So I'm going to say in 30 transactions. So I've been around that block a lot. Now, one of the things that happens in strategy and M&A is, as you're rising up the ladder, if you're giving your CEO and CFO good advice, they keep promoting you. The minute you give them bad advice, they fire you, right? The only thing that was lucky for me is I kept giving them good advice, and I kept rising until I reached the very top. But I have to say, I can't put that down to brilliance or anything. I've already said to you I didn't win the President's Gold Medal. But it was because I was in the mobile phone industry right at the beginning. And I was able to ride the wave, essentially. Because every time somebody would come and say, well, mobile phones, only for rich people, not everybody would have it. You do a little counter-argument to that, and you go to the next step. And then there'd be a counter-argument with miniaturization, and the next step. So I was very lucky that I caught the wave at a time, that most of the advice that I gave happened to be good advice.
Well, I think Sir Arun's being a little modest. There were lots of contrarians in the industry at that time. And it would be an amusing thing to go back and some of the statements people made in the 80s about the possible murky future,
yes,
of the mobile phone industry. But going back to the M&A, every transaction, has its own story. There's always the moment of the deal. There's a time when it looks like it's not going to happen, and then somebody shifts. Any particular anecdote that you could share that comes to mind that could also be potentially illustrative for us about how to negotiate or how to emerge sort of unbruised?
So look, there are many instances, and actually I'll give you one example of a very public takeover. So my predecessor at Vodafone was a guy called, all the CEOs end up becoming Sir, so Sir Chris Gent. Chris was the one who bought my company called AirTouch in San Francisco. And he paid us $75 billion for the company. This is in 1999. It's still big money, but back then it was seriously big money. So we all retired, pretty much. We said, thank you, this is great. You bought the company, you can run the company. Here are all the assets, here are all the keys, here are all the locks, here are all the skeletons, all of that, take it and go. He said, no, I want you to stay on my board because I need to integrate these companies and I want your advice and counsel. I said, sure. Even before we had properly integrated Vodafone and AirTouch, he made a hostile bid for a company called Management, a German company that owned the German and Italian license. And it so happened that we were partners with Mannesmann in Germany. Mannesmann was the majority partner, and AirTouch was the minority partner. So I knew all the people who were running Mannesmann and all of that. This became a very nasty, hostile acquisition. The guy who ran Mannesmann was a guy called Klaus Esser. Klaus Esser took the value of Mannesmann from close to $100 billion to $200 billion simply by being difficult and saying, no, I'm not going to merge. So he created, literally single-handedly, $100 billion for his shareholders, just by being difficult. Now you have to remember, I'm on this side of the ledger. I'm on the paying too much side of the ledger here. Eventually, he sold the business. But it was difficult, it was bruising, it was in the newspapers every day, it had all the German politicians involved, it had all the British politicians involved. It was a proper Games of Thrones kind of incident. For all his services, Klaus Esser was given by his board a $10 million bonus for having created $100 billion worth of value. Poor guy. Even that was challenged in the courts for like 10 years. So when you think about it, you think in US terms where CEOs make hundreds of millions of dollars. European terms, they make, call it half that. Here's a German chief executive who got half a year's salary, and he had to suffer the bruising of a lifetime. Anyway.
What turned it? What turned it? How did they? I mean, they were just into the play, and then finally they.
No, in the end, it was like, you're clearly not worth $200 billion. Take the offer.
Okay.
Because he had some common shareholders with our shareholders, and our shareholders were telling us, "Hey, you're paying too much," and his shareholders were going, "Please take it, because we will never ever be a $200 billion company." And to be honest with you, it was not a $200 billion company. When I became the chief executive a couple of years later, I had to take a $50 billion write-down. So anyway, this is probably interesting to you, but I'm not sure it's interesting to all of you.
No, it is. It's the dynamics of transactions. And the dynamics of the transaction shape its alleged success or failure. And often and I've studied a number of transactions, it's amazing to me how they turn on, ultimately, they pivot on small things. And I studied all the Tata acquisitions. Tata is the most active acquirers, and there are 44 such acquisitions, and there's a story in each one. I want to ask a sort of a semi-academic question associated with that. In academics, when we talk about core competencies of firms, one of the elements that's been in the strategy literature for the last 20-odd years is this creation of dynamic capabilities. That how firms create dynamic competencies which are boundary spanning. They're things that you do well as a company. Outsourcing, which is a complex, challenging thing to truly optimize. M&A, how well are you? How do you do at M&A? Product launches in new countries. So did you personally evolve a kind of a modus operandi for your M&A activities over your 30 transactions?
Yes.
And did that become the Vodafone way?
Yeah, so we acquired a lot of companies, and I'd say we were good at doing mergers and acquisitions and integrating them. And in cell phone companies, if there are any HCL people here, you will know. There's a lot of sort of IT background stuff in terms of billing and servicing, etc., that needs to be integrated to actually get the value of the cost synergies. But at AirTouch and Vodafone, the key capability that we developed was we were the best systems integrators in terms of taking, radio gear from Ericsson and Nokia and all of these folks and putting it together, deploying it so that we can provide our customers seamless good service. Today, that feels like table stakes. If you don't have good service, why would anybody use your service? But back in the day, that was a huge competitive advantage. The ability to be able to launch Germany or Italy or America or India in a massive way so that you can provide services and then have distribution against it and grow in the tens of millions of customers. So I would say the core competency of the company, while M&A was important, was always more rigorous in the core business that we had.
No, and so it gets to codify that so that it can, in a sense, move beyond teams, and there's tacit knowledge. So was there explicit effort that your strategy team put in a sense, create that ongoing M&A competency? Because by itself, that adds hundreds of millions of dollars of value.
Yeah. So, my view is it's very important to have clever strategy people as a CEO and as a leader. But I would say you need to have 10x the number of people who are good at operating the company. And I've always said, to be a great leader, you need to have three things that you do really well. One is you've got to be good strategically, so you can see how the cookie's going to crumble, and you need to move left, you need to move right, or whatever. That's important. And
And how do you push your courage to the sticking place when you have to make a bet?
Correct.
At that point, even early in your journey.
Correct. And that skill I would call sort of the McKinsey skill, being really clever in your brain. But that's only part of the equation. You have to be very good operational. To be able to wake up every morning, make sure whatever part of the operation you're responsible for, whether it's sales or marketing or technical or research, that you're hitting your numbers, you're selling, you're motivating your teams, you're producing the numbers. This is almost sort of slightly orthogonal to the first skill that I talked about. This is a sort of non-McKinsey skill. This is the ability to get the job done, take the wash out, do the little things that need to be done, and produce results with your team. That's an operating skill. Very important. And finally, it's about human skills. The ability to form a team, create a team, charge up a team, make sure the team goes and takes the mountain. Just the human skills. Because some people are very clever, but they actually don't have very good human skills. Some people are very good in operations, but they actually don't have the cleverness. The hard part is it's not an or. It's not strategy or operations or human skills. It is strategy and operations and human skills. When you put those three things together, that's when you're sort of kind of reaching the pinnacle of an organization. And I would say, if you said, throughout my career, that would be the thing I would say to people. One is not enough. If you're a good strategy, I'll put you in operations. Let's see how well you do here. I'll put you in human resources. I'll take you, if you're a great operator, I'll put you in strategy. Let's see how well you do here. Because the thing is, these are learned skills. This is not, God, you're born with this stuff, and I'm just an operator, or I'm just a clever person. No. If you catch this early on in your career, you can actually develop these skills over a period of time.
Can we unpack that one portion of it? What makes a clever strategist in your view?
A clever strategist is somebody who understands sort of the dynamics of an industry, really understands the microeconomics of an industry. Where's the demand coming for? How's the supply coming along? How do the two meet? What's technology trends? Customer needs? What competition is doing? What might happen in regulation? and then be able to say, look, we are headed, as a company, we're headed this way, we're going to have to turn a little bit 5 degrees, go for a while this way, then we're going to have to turn 7 degrees and go this way. In a cell phone company, it has to do with knowing when the next generation of technology is coming. What are the new, genuine use cases of that technology? So, for example, there's a lot of noise in my industry, phone industry, around 5G. 5G is going to do this and 5G is going to do that. And it's like, really? Is it going to be anything more than more, faster bandwidth? Because frankly, if I'm driving an autonomous vehicle, whether it's in India, long ways away, even in America, I'm not going to rely on the cell phone network to be going back and forth to servers telling me that I've got a car 2 inches from me. All this compute power has to be in the car itself, right? So if you start pressing people and saying, no, help me understand what exactly is the use case. The ability to say, yep, the use case is not that, but it actually might be beaming straight into your home and into your gaming platform so that you can play high-speed games. Or, no, it's not that, it's something else. That is the cleverness that a strategist provides a CEO, and then the CEO can say, I agree with you or disagree with you, or you go to the back of the bus, or you go come to the front of the line here, whatever the case might be. It's a risky business.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to shift tack slightly, but before I do that, can we just linger on what your business school days, since a number of all our students will be watching this video later. What do you remember from your business school days? What leads to kind of success and satisfaction in business schools? How do you get the best outcome?
I'm going to give them advice on what they should do, not what I did.
Well, you can say what you did and they can kind of choose.
No, maybe not. So look, my business school days, I got a master's in engineering and an MBA in 3 years at Cal. So I was just sort of busy and boring. That's not what I would advise people to do. Don't be busy and boring. It's a waste essentially. I made up for it later on. But look, I think at business school, outside of learning microeconomics really well, outside of learning finance really well, outside of learning marketing really well, outside of learning operations research pretty well, and learning organization theory and behavior. I was 22 years old when I went to business school. Wrong. You don't want to be a 22-year-old in business school. Right? I had no experience in the working world. I had to take an organization design, and I remember asking myself, why is it so hard to align an organization? Don't people automatically align to do the right thing? So that was my naivete taking this class. And I took the class, I did fine and all that, and I never thought much of organizational principles and design and all that, only to find out that was eating half my time as the CEO and as a senior executive. And I was going, holy smokes, I should have paid more attention to that class, right? So, look, the nice things about business schools is today they have like-minded people. They all want to do things in their life. They have some experiences. The network that you create, the friendships that you create, obviously the academics has to come along, but it's an experiential thing. As much as it's an academic thing, it's an experiential. So I would say enjoy that part of being in business school. Yeah. Yeah, have fun.
Great. Well, remember that's, as I'm addressing our students, that's a great lesson to remember. You must dip deeply from the cup of the core subjects. That's what I heard. And immerse yourself in the primary learning. Certainly one of the memories I have that those first subjects, first exposure to every aspect of business is just fascinating. And it's really enriching and gets you excited about actually getting into business. So, by the way, when he finished school, his wife and he went out and endowed a chair at the school. Hint, hint for our future alumni.
I highly recommend it.
So switching tack a little bit, and let's look at the industry. You're on the boards of some very exciting, interesting companies. Each of those industries are evolving rapidly, immersive. New transformative technologies are coming down the pipe. Can we do a quick bang and see where you see, for instance, personal communication going? Think of sort of an example: Google Translator, Google Glass. Where your artificial reality, augmented reality, embedded chips inside you that allow you to communicate, holography. Where do you see it all coming together?
So, in the last 15 minutes, we've talked about my career as a strategist. So everybody has their own brand of strategy. My brand of strategy was always, I find that there are lots and lots of ideas in the world at any point in time. Is to be able to say, hogwash, 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 too early, about right. So I'm in that camp. I'm not in the camp that says anything that comes out of Amazon or Google or any of these guys is a great thing. I could have told you a long time ago that the fiber test that Google had of what they were doing was nonsense. They hadn't done their homework. If they had done their homework, they would have known that it's nonsense. Just because you created the best search engine doesn't make it that you're going to do the best fiber stuff, or putting up balloons, or recording real-time stuff without people's permission. So I'm sorry, this is going to sound tough, but I'm not into BS idea generation. My view is much more, look at everything. Have a really quick assessment on this is going to work for the following reasons. And everybody has their own sort of compass as to how they determine that. But I'm big on the thing that says, no. A lot of this stuff is nice talking points, but ain't going anywhere. But you need to focus on certain things that you can actually see change. You might say, well, Arun, that sounds rather incremental rather than leapfrog. And I'm okay with that. Rather than do something leapfroggy that takes it over.
No, in fact, when we look at the spectrum of strategy and the spectrum of options leaders face, when you look back at things that were perhaps less successful, we find that they got wedded to one or the other, perhaps unrelated to the economics. Something triggers a passion and that takes a company down a certain path. How do you avoid that trap? It seems like you were very, very discerning about not getting too enamored of something that otherwise seemed, potentially very, very transformative.
So back in the mid-1990s, there was a technology. For those of you in sort of the cell phone space, you may remember it or may know of it. It was called CDMA. And there was a company called Qualcomm that was promoting CDMA. And there was another standard called GSM that was being promoted by the Europeans, mostly Ericsson and Nokia and others. These were holy battles back in the day as to, which technology is going to succeed and all that stuff. And we initially, in the United States, went down the CDMA route. I was running a global business, so And we couldn't transport that CDMA technology into Europe because Europe had TDMA GSM. But the number of wars that were fought and the number of bodies that were counted at the end of the wars are too numerous to recall here. But in the United States, we stayed with CDMA, went on to WCDMA, then went on to LTE. In Europe, we stayed with GSM, and in the end went on to LTE as well. So, what you have to do is be close to the situation. You can't get married to something. Even to this day, when we were doing GSM in Europe, I wasn't 100% sure. Or when we were doing CDMA here, I wasn't 100% sure. So you've got to keep an open mind and let the facts speak, because you'll always find there are people who can be very articulate about their point of view and why this is going to be the next thing since sliced bread.
Now, Ola has been a unicorn. Where do you see that war shaping up? There's lots of interlocking investments, so eventually we're going to probably have a few consolidated winners in this. Where do you see that going? And do you see Ola now aggressively expanding overseas? They were certainly making a big effort in multiple countries.
Yeah. So first of all, Ola is a terrific company, and it starts with having a terrific entrepreneur in Bhavesh Agarwal. He's one of the most amazing young people I've met in India. He's very bright. He's able to do this thing I talked about earlier: strategy, operations, people. He's got those three things. He's very good on strategy, but then he's equally very involved in day-to-day operations, what's going on, looking at the metrics, changing things, changing pricing, changing product, etc. And he's good at it. We currently in India have a 65% market share against Uber's 35% market share. We're competing with the best, frankly. And I actually really like that kind of a fight. If you're not competing with the best, it feels like you're bullying someone. When you're competing with the best, it's a real fight. And frankly, we're on to a real fight. They have great innovation, we have great innovation, we have a lot of local innovation. The big space that this occupies is transportation. So whether it's first mile, last mile, whether it's, you started off with taxis and all of that, but it's going to grow in every direction, essentially. The unit economics will change a little bit. They're slightly subpar. I know Uber's just gone public. They've shown their numbers. Their numbers are not that good, frankly. Our numbers are much better. And my view is it's a fascinating space because it's solving a real problem for the local population. And if we can get this right, all the short and medium length trips should actually be done largely with the Olas and the Ubers. I'm not saying, and therefore nobody will have a car. I think that's going a little too far. But you certainly don't need a second car and a third car and all of that stuff. And, dropping your schools off at kids off at school, or going shopping after work or during work or whatever. These are all things. If I can press an app and have a car show up, a clean, safe car show up within 2 minutes, that's as good as having
Your own?
sort of chauffeur waiting for him outside. Right, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge user of it.
I know you.
No, that's most certainly been the case, and the age of vanguard Indian multinationals, I think, is on its way. We can expect, and that was one of the reasons that I want to pick on these, that these are really the spearhead for what we hope is really the next wave to come.
Yeah. And Oyo is a great example as well. You asked about international expansion. We are expanding internationally. You will see more and more international expansion. Oyo is expanding internationally. Ritesh is a great entrepreneur. I'd say those two are among the best entrepreneurs in India today.
And with the payment infrastructure that we have. Looking back now that, you've, of course, are linked with India, especially professionally, personally, how do you see your relationship with India as an entity going forward? Do you imagine deeper engagement in some fashion, or is there anything that we can sort of prize out of you that might be down the road?
You make the question sound like a really heavy question. But, I'm sorry, I don't have a heavy answer. I'm not very simple. I have a relationship with India. One, because I was born here. I lived 20 years here before I went to America. I find what's going on in the startup ecosystem here very interesting. And so I have invested in Ola and Pine Labs and Daily Hunt, Misho, and all those companies. Fine. I come to India 2 or 3 times a year for a week or so at a time. I have wonderful friends like all of you here. But that's why, and I know a fair number of people in the country, and so that's my relationship. It's highly unlikely that is going to change very much. I'll continue to be an investor. I'll continue to be a mentor to the Bhavishas of the world. And I enjoy coming back just because it reminds me of my early days.
Good. Well, actually, I had a sneaky vested interest in asking him that question. We're going to try and bind him a little bit more, certainly Shiv Nadar University. So that was really behind that. So I'm going to ask one last question, perhaps personally, and then I'm going to turn it over to all of you in case any of you have questions. You talked about your love and your facility with sports. You've been good at sport, and of course, having good hand-eye coordination in all the games that you played led naturally to golf. And golf is an amazing sport for those of you who haven't really deeply gotten into it. It mirrors the vicissitudes of life, so it's long enough, like a test match, to really teach you a lot of things about life. What is it that compels you with regard to golf, and what's been that journey, and what would you say to future leaders, for it is somewhat tied to, corporate elevation as well?
I was with you the entire time except for your last sentence.
Sure.
I actually, a lot of people say, how many deals did you do on the golf course? 0. For me, actually, golf and work are marginally related. But the first part, this is a very heavy, serious subject. I don't know if you all want to get into it, but I'm going to give you 1 or 2 thoughts on it. First of all, the reason golf is a sort of a fun game is it does mirror life. Meaning you get up on the tee, you hit a ball, you think you're going to hit it straight, you actually push it a little bit, it goes into a sand bunker. So now you have a choice. You see the flag over there, you have a choice. I'm going to hit straight from the bunker to the flag. Or you say, you know what, maybe it's more sensible that I should come out of the bunker first and then hit my next shot. I'll be down 1 stroke, obviously, but I'll make it up along the way. So it forces you to think about risk-reward all the time. And I think that's a fascinating thing because it's much like life. You're coming along and something happens and you're going to go, how do I reboot myself here? Should I take a chance? Should I not? So it forces you constantly, they call it a thinking man's game, because you have to think your way through golf. So I like that part of it. To be honest with you, the reason I like golf is golf at the time you're getting ready to strike the ball requires incredible focus, just for a couple of seconds. But if you are even slightly unfocused during your swing, you're going to hit a bad shot. So it forces you, it's like being a Formula One racing driver. Except, in a Formula One racing driver, you have to be in that zone for an hour and a half, otherwise you're dead. In golf, every few minutes, you have to kind of focus deeply. And so the question is, so what is this concept of focus? Why do you feel like you have to focus deeply? The reason is that most of us are not living in the present at any time. We're either living in the past or we're living in the future, but we're not always there. Think about meditation, think about yoga. It's about actually coming together for a short period of time, having a strategy, executing it. Reminds you of that strategy operations people. It has all the same elements of kind of putting everything together. It's not good enough to say, well, my strategy was to go there, but I executed a really bad shot and I'm still in the bottom. That's good. So this ability to be in the moment. Personally, for me, for the work that I did in my life, I found that incredibly relaxing. Incredibly relaxing. And then you're walking with friends in usually a very wooded, very beautiful golf course or part of the world. So all of those are bonuses playing golf.
Sure. Not only the surrounding aesthetics, the physical aesthetics, and the feeling that you get. Golf teaches you humility. I think nothing embarrasses you more in many ways. So there's a lot that one could wax eloquent about with regard to sport, and especially longer sport, and how they prepare you for leadership. So with that segue, let me open it out. We have a few minutes. Anybody have a burning question to ask Sir Arun? Sundar.
Thank you so much for me to introduce me. Just a question on, so how do you spend your time now? You have pretty much done everything. And so right now, how do you, let's say, think about your time and how best use it, given how you can use it?
Yeah. Very good question. So I'd say I spend 2/3 of my time on boards and my investments and my mentorship, things that sort of basically remind me of the days gone by. I have some big company boards which give me a global view of what's going on around the world and who's doing what to do. And then I have these smaller companies who I can help with, sort of helping them have the right culture and organization and metrics to kind of be successful. So I'd say 65% of my time I'm involved with companies. I'd say 10-15% of my time I do pro bono work. I'm involved with my university in California at the chancellor level, at the engineering level, at the business school level, and a couple of other things. And frankly, the rest of the time, I want to keep safe for my family and my friends. There was a time when my kids were growing up, I was never there. So now it's like, be there for them. Anytime they want me, anytime they want to talk to me, whatever the case might be. So I'd say that's how I sort of roughly spend my time. And I have to tell you, it's a wonderful balance for me at this stage of my life. Obviously, I couldn't have done it in a younger, earlier time period, but I'm enjoying it very much.
Any other question?
So you are an extremely successful person in life, maybe in all fields in which you are. Maybe my question would be slightly different. Maybe whether it's right or wrong, maybe let's see that. What is your single biggest failure in life, and what have you learned from it?
So, first of all, it's not one failure. I've had many failures. So, but I'll just highlight one. Right after I sold AirTouch to Vodafone, and before I became chief executive of Vodafone, I had 2 or 3 years And I was fascinated by a company in the internet space. And I came from a company where when you publish your results or you publish your prospectus, etc., whatever you say is absolutely true and correct and all of that. And every company, if you look at the prospectus, has risk factors. If anybody has looked at the risk factors of Uber, you'll see they highlight everything that can possibly go wrong and all that. We did the same thing at AirTouch and Vodafone, but actually, virtually none of those bad outcomes ever came true. So anyway, I was fascinated with this company. I joined this company. I went there and I looked around and I found that virtually every risk factor, that the software may not work, it may not scale, our data centers might have breaches, blah, 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 blah. Every single one of those risk factors, which is meant to be sort of a tail risk, was actually a risk in this company and was actually occurring. I had clearly made a big mistake. And it was actually not a mistake of all the things that this company was doing. They were doing search, e-commerce, mobility solutions. All of these things came right and true 2 years, 6 years, 10 years later. They were early. But the mistake was actually a human mistake. And the human mistake was I should have done more diligence on the person who was leading me to this place, essentially. And that was a judgment mistake. And I have to tell you, most of the mistakes that I feel I've made, obviously there's some strategic mistakes and all that. Companies recover from strategic mistakes. Have been around people, misjudging people on both sides. It's not just, underestimating, sometimes overestimating, sometimes. In organizations, you need to sort of kind of refresh, and sometimes you say, maybe I need to give this person more time. And my mistakes have mostly been people mistakes. And I don't have a good, if you said, let's talk more strategy so we can create some frameworks to, figure out how best to do it. On the people side, the frameworks are much harder because humans are much more complex beings.
And it can lead to, what a friend of mine who often says this, and I love that quote, it's the unintended consequences of unexamined assumptions. And we often don't examine all of the assumptions, especially about people. And that can, of course, every now and then lead to some surprises. Well, we could, of course, continue this conversation for a long time. It's so very easy to talk to. There's so many things we could chat with them about, but we do have to bring this session to a close. So before I do that, I want to acknowledge the presence of Saurav Adhikari, who's a member of the Executive Council. He's specially associated with the Business School. He's a special advisor to SNF after a long and glittering career at HCL. Now, Saurav has known Sir Arun for a while. Saurav, let me give you the last thought. What would be your observations? Can we roast Arun? Can we ask him some good questions? What can we do to send us off to lunch?
It's kind of late for lunch, but what I want to say is that I want to share some, a personal side of Arun, which I've discovered over the last few years, is that it's really amazing how Arun blends this, this left brain side of his, entire approach to analyzing what a situation is like and how to respond to it, with a deeply human side. Now that's something that cannot be taught at business school. That's not something that can, just easily be acquired. It takes something, innate, which Arun obviously blessed with, but it also is something that I think over time people can acquire. I think Arun has that blend, which is just amazing. It's just amazing. And the ability to articulate such complex thoughts, which he's lived in and shaped, and be able to just make it so comprehensible to all of us is just just amazing. It's only a comment I had. I don't want to roast out anymore.
No, that's great. Well,
It's time to get in.
This is the next gen new version of the vote of thanks. No, that was very nicely done. Thank you so much, Arun. It was such a pleasure to have you. And thank you all for